3, hit it!
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And the title of today's episode is Thought Detox. And that's a phrase that came out of a seminar that I was teaching with a woman named Kathy Casey, who is one of my colleagues in the Inside Out Understanding that I share in these podcasts. But her specialty for many, many years was working in the prison system and in sort of social work and people on the fringes of traditional society. And she was co-teaching a group with me. And one of the things that if you've ever done this kind of work, you may even experience it sometimes listening to these podcasts, is that people tend to have one of two experiences somewhat predictably if they're coming for a multi-day event. Is the first or second night, they are either more tired than they've been in ages, and they can barely wake up, or they're hyper. They have more energy than they're used to having. And somebody was asking Kathy about that phenomenon, and she said, "Oh yeah," she said that comes up a lot in the homeless shelters in the prison. I call it thought detox. And I thought it was such a brilliant metaphor, because we tend to habitually live in so much thinking. We have so much going on in our minds, and it keeps our nervous systems heightened. We're continually creating stressful thoughts and fight or flight responses within ourselves, and we're hyping ourselves up to try and stay motivated, or we're bringing ourselves down to try and chill ourselves out. And we're living on a constant diet of thought. It's almost like we're being paid by the thought how much we think. And what we don't see, because it just becomes background, it just becomes our new, somewhat unhealthy normal, is that we're living in this sea of thinking. But it's so habitual, we don't even notice it. And so what happens when it slows down, which is what inevitably happens when you start to catch a glimpse of how the mind really works, when you start to see those habits of thought for what they are, just habits of thought. They're not personal, they're not good or bad, they're either helpful to you or they're not. And it so happens that habits of thought like knowing how doors open is really helpful, so you don't have to figure out every door every time. But habits of thought like discouraging yourself when one thing goes wrong are less helpful, because you tend to spend a lot of time feeling discouraged. And the beautiful thing about how we're made, about how the system is designed, about our divine engineering, our divine architecture, is all we have to do for a habit of thought to change is to notice it as we're doing it, to see them for what they are, to let them pass, to let them come and go. So if you notice yourself pressuring yourself, it's not so hard to let it go, or at least not take it so seriously. If you notice yourself stressing yourself out by scaring yourself about futures, stacking lots of futures on top of one another until you're just going, "Ah!" then it's not so hard to stop. If you notice yourself hitting yourself in the head with a hammer, it's not so hard to put the hammer down, at least some of the time. And so as we see thought, we see ourselves thinking ourselves in and out of well-being, we can let more and more of those thoughts pass through. And because we're not caught up in so much thinking, our bodies detox from it. They find their way back to homeostasis. They find their way back to the peace that we were all born in, to the restfulness that is our nature, to the energy that is always available when we're not gumming up the system with all those chemicals that get fired off by thought. Now, sometimes I'll say this to somebody or to a group, and somebody will say, just to check, "Now, so what you're saying is, when I get kind of all caught up, I need to tell myself it's just my thinking. Well, no. Because if you need to tell yourself it's just your thinking, you probably think it's something else. You probably think it really is you've got too much to do and not enough time to do it. You probably think it really is this other person and what they're asking of you and what they're doing. You probably think it really is something to do with the world or something to do with some deep fundamental flaw in you. Instead of actually seeing, oh, my head hurts because I'm hitting myself with a hammer. Oh, I'm stressed because I'm thinking a lot of really stressful thoughts and stacking them on top of one another. Oh, I feel pressure because I'm pressuring myself. Oh, I feel discouraged because I'm discouraging myself. Oh, I feel scared because I'm scaring myself. And when you see that, it's pretty straightforward to stop doing it. And in fact, one of my favorite descriptions of this understanding, one of my favorite summary statements, so it is accurate but incomplete, comes from one of my other mentors, Elsie Spittle. And she talks about how for her, this whole understanding that sort of stemmed from the discoveries of Sid Banks, the enlightened Scottish welder, where he talked about it in terms of three principles: mind, the intelligence of life; consciousness, this capacity to experience and to understand where our experience is coming from, to notice; and thought, the creative force, is I see thought. I, the I am, the energy of life, the intelligence of life. See, consciousness, notice, thought. The true me, the me that is beyond my psychology, notices my use of the creative power of thought. And because it feels bad, I know that I'm inadvertently using it against myself. And so because I can see it, I don't have to keep doing it. Now, if I don't see it, if I try telling myself, that's probably not going to work. But if I keep looking, and that really is what's happening, I will see it. And each time I see it, each time I catch myself stressing myself, pressuring myself, discouraging myself, scaring myself, it's a little bit easier to let it go. It's a little bit easier to not take it so seriously. And because I'm no longer continually firing up all that brain chemistry and body chemistry with all that thinking, my system cleans itself out. It goes through a thought detox. I may temporarily be really tired or really hyper or feel unmotivated or feel hyper-motivated. But it doesn't take too long before I settle back into a natural, mentally healthy, gentle, energized state of being. Have fun, learn heaps, happy exploring. You don't have to think about this one, but I'll talk to you soon.